a little bit of my backstory is that I was given a book that was written by Verlin H. Anderson about 7 years ago by a neighbor. And she said, I read this book and I just think it's something you'll really like. And has anybody read that book here? It's called Many Are Called, But Few Are Chosen. And that book shook my core, and I thought, okay, I've got to do something different with my life. And about that time, I just randomly heard about a school called American Heritage School down in American Fork, and my family was living in Sandy at that time, but I just, without telling my husband, went down on a tour of that school and walked away and said, oh, okay, guess we're gonna have to start commuting our kids down to the school. So we did that for several years until our daughter hit 7th grade and wanted to try out for basketball, and we realized we had to move. So now we're in Highland, but amidst it all, I've gotten to know Oak very well. We helped do a lot of work together on Utahns Against Common Core, and then helped start some other groups with some amazing moms. One of those groups is called Return to Parental Rights, and another is called Gathering Families, to help families kind of return to biblical principles for educating their children. So I was so grateful that Allie started out today, where I'll probably going to be referring to you all day, talking about the freedom principle and the force philosophy. Because we live in historic times, and today I hope to show you how you are standing shoulder to shoulder with those great men and women who stood for the freedom principle, and why it's actually becoming crucial that we do so. We're each aware of how society's Christian values are diminishing, aided by degrading music, promiscuous movies, pornographic internet content, but I want to talk to you today about how online curriculum and assessments are now being used to wage a worldwide cultural war against families. Many parents around the country are fighting valiantly to stop comprehensive sexuality education, a dangerous, often pornographic, sexual rights and gender ideology curriculum that's being taught to young children in health class. What I hope to show you is that this curriculum was designed from its inception to kick down the health class door and shove its way into all subjects through both teacher training and online learning. I'm going to start my presentation by playing a video of Common Core's architect, David Coleman. He's speaking at a conference in Texas in 2013, and I'm just gonna play it. There's a short 10-second clip and then another short 45-second clip, but it's from the same speech and points some things out.
And it was really through the work with the team from NEA that we came up with what I dare say and still believe to be a magisterial architecture. Standards, by the way, we were given the brief of writing standards in English language arts. We broke that promise, you could say, by insisting to write standards not just in English language arts, but standards for literacy in history and social studies, science, and technical subjects. To tell you a private moment, I threatened to resign when we were told that this was not our job. So nothing comes without conflict in this world. What force then was strong enough? What force demanded that not just English language arts teachers, but teachers in history and social studies, science and technical subjects bear the responsibility of bringing their kids to literacy? It was actually the American Federation of Teachers.
So Mr. Coleman told us two very important things there. First, he worked with the NEA. Not very many people have heard that before. At that time, the NEA had already been working with Planned Parenthood and had created the comprehensive sexuality standards aligned to Common Core. Then he told us that he worked with the American Federation of Teachers to insist that Common Core standards would integrate into all curriculum subjects through online literacy standards. You may know that pro-family groups in Utah are challenging the Comprehensive Sexuality Bill for the third time this legislative session in Utah. But here's how the sexual rights lobby is working around state legislation, and I'm going to give you an example from Africa. In Rwanda, the United Nations group known as UNESCO is training teachers and children to use technology to integrate comprehensive sexuality curriculum into most academic subjects. UNESCO is one of the originators of Common Core, And they say that they're helping teachers and leaders cross-cut comprehensive sexuality curriculum into the following subjects: science, elementary technology, social studies, religious studies, biology and health sciences, general studies, communication skills, and history and citizenship. UNESCO says that they're helping youth in 5 African countries create online apps for peer-to-peer networking so that they can teach each other. They also say that comprehensive sex ed will be embedded into the education system through competency-based education. And this is very important to understand, and I'm going to talk about it. Both Google and Microsoft are UNESCO partners, with deals to promote UNESCO's values through a world curriculum. The Trump administration recently rebuked UNESCO for its anti-Israel bias. Trump also helped states pull funding from Planned Parenthood. But there's another group that's running the education agendas for both of these groups, and they are called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD, that's their acronym, is a world policy organization based in France that runs an assessment system to support the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And the OECD's Educational Assessment Director, a German named Andreas Schleicher, worked with the Obama administration to reshape our K-12 online assessment systems so that assessments run in the background of online curriculum and are now more about assessing behaviors than academics. And I want to insert here that Andreas Schleicher actually meets with state legislators, works over an education committee at the National Conference of State Legislators. In my presentation here 2 years ago, I talked about how Common Core competency-based ed was different than what we in Utah think about when we hear the term competency-based ed. So I want to share a quote with you from the OECD. The skills, attitudes, and values that shape human behavior should be rethought to counter the discriminatory behaviors picked up at school and in the family. All young people should be able to challenge cultural and gender stereotypes, to reflect on the causes and solutions of racial, religious, and hate violence, and to help create tolerant, integrated societies. So children will be competent when they despise Christianity. I'm going to play a video from the OECD describing what their worldwide assessment systems do, and it's the assessment system, some of you may have heard of it, called PISA.
Although it's the brainchild of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, based in Paris, France, the assessment is designed by education experts from around the world. In fact, since the programme began in 2000, every one of the more than 80 economies that have participated in PISA have contributed some of their best minds to creating a test the whole world can take. The assessment tries to find out whether students can apply what they have learned in school to real-life situations. It covers science, reading, mathematics, and some more innovative subjects like collaborative problem-solving or financial literacy. Countries volunteer to participate in PISA. If a country is not equipped to take part in such a large-scale assessment, regions of that country may participate on their own. Once a country is approved by the PISA Governing Board, individual schools are chosen based on stringent criteria to represent all 15-year-old students in that country. Students who participate in PISA are randomly chosen from among all the 15-year-olds enrolled in grade 7 or higher in the selected schools. They take the test in the same language they use in their normal classes. Students aren't asked to recall dates and names they may have memorized. Instead, they are asked to interpret texts, solve mathematics problems, or explain a phenomenon scientifically, using their knowledge and reasoning skills. Students aren't given individual reports on how they did on the PISA test, but their scores count towards a national mean score. Despite what you may hear every 3 years when PISA results are announced, PISA is not just about ranking countries. It's about showing whether school systems are becoming more or less effective in preparing their students for further study or for work. It's about learning whether 15-year-olds are acquiring the social and emotional skills they'll need to thrive, like knowing how to work and communicate with others. And it's about taking the results of the assessment, translating them into millions of pieces of data, and putting those pieces together to create a picture of what the most effective education systems look like. In the end, these systems are the ones in which all students, not just the most advantaged, are given the best opportunities to learn and the greatest support in realising their potential. PISA aims not only to show how these systems are constructed, but to encourage countries to learn from each other's experience in building fairer and more inclusive school systems.
So children's scores on PISA are used all the time to make everybody feel guilty about, we're not competing. Our students are going to fall behind on math and science. Oh no, we won't be able to compete in a global economy. What are we going to do? Our children are not going to be prepared for college. You hear it all the time at the state legislature. But the problem is this something that we're all now doing to solve the poor scores on PISA is implementing global competency-based ed. Did you notice that in the video, they said they're moving away from assessing academics and towards assessing social and emotional skills? These are the values and behaviors that we all have to exhibit now to be competent in a post-Christian world. In your local schools and board meetings, you'll hear leaders use the terms, we need to help kids have the right knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And then you hear a lot of people talking about grit and perseverance lately. These are terms that came straight from the OECD. Did you see that the OECD wants to spread data everywhere to improve our evidence-based policies? So for the first time in history, America is using computer adaptive assessments in K through 12. Much of this shift was funded during the Obama administration. Bill Gates and the Obama administration knew that a national assessment for global competency-based ed would be illegal, but that with the help of technology, they could create a worldwide assessment ecosystem, coercing all the major assessment and curriculum providers to create a behavioral assessment system. The plan had nothing to do with a 3 times a year test that parents can opt out of, but instead, it's a curriculum-based assessment system that children use every day. This way, all the data from the various technology groups can be used to nudge children to learn the right behaviors and nudge schools into having the right policies. So, in this slide, you can see that Bill Gates' group and the Obama administration and this group called IMS Global, they're helping this group called IMS Global create an executive assessment board. And these are the assessment groups that are already on this assessment board, working under the direction of the OECD. All of these groups are now supporting the OECD's vision for competency-based education. You'll notice Questar, which is Utah's newest assessment, and the ACT are both listed. But there's more. So far, over 70 learning systems, 350 organizations, including universities, and 380 tech products, like the student information system Canvas, are building a worldwide ecosystem to share children's private information across platforms. Sorry, I have to do my notes from paper. I can't read off a screen. So these 2 screens from IMS Global show how they're giving us a world curriculum. Share test items across platforms in real time, share student roster information that's supposed to be privately held in schools, share children's tutoring and counseling information, attendance information, assessment scores, all in the name of global competency-based ed. So why are the technology groups jumping on board with this vision? It's because behavioral data is where the money is. When Bill Gates spoke to the National Conference of State Legislators in 2009 about Common Core, he actually told us what he was doing. He said he was creating a new market that would be driven by the power of next generation assessments. So if people would have only listened to what he was actually saying, I'm going to give a little bit of a translation. Bill Gates, if people had only paid attention to the fact that Bill Gates is one of the largest funders of international Planned Parenthood and is partnered with UNESCO, they would have heard him telling us this. I partnered with UNESCO for sustainable development, and now we're creating a world curriculum within a market that we in the OECD can control. And within that market, everyone will develop next generation assessments that will be delivered to children through computer adaptive curriculum in order to make sure that each child learns the right values and behaviors. And because we've created this new market where all the curriculum assessment and student information systems are integrating by using open data standards, we're going to be able to see all the data that flows freely between them so we can make sure parents and children are accountable to us for what they learn. So now UNESCO, Microsoft, and our friends at Google and other places will be able to see how children and teachers think, feel, and act, and be able to adapt their curriculum and assessments to change their behavior so that we can solve real world problems. Children will have fun because we'll dish it out to them in online games and apps that reward them with digital badges for the right behavior. No one will even stop to think that we're controlling what everyone's learning and using online games to manipulate their worldview. Parents won't even ask what's being taught. Children won't even ask what's true anymore. The curriculum will tell them what's true. And they'll believe it because their advancement through the adaptive online curriculum and their future employment will depend on it. And throughout his speech, he talks about how fun it's going to be. In 2015, Bill Gates told the largest newspaper in Germany, we need a world government to solve society's urgent problems. And he's doing that in education. He's building a world government so that children will serve the goals of the state. It's a state church, and it is an all-out assault on religious freedom. I want to share something with you that a Utah teacher shared with me. She said that because of competency-based ed and personalized learning, she no longer sees her students' curriculum or assessments anymore. This is a teacher from Hurricane. Why? Because every child is online and on their own computer. Their lessons are personalized just for them and adapt depending on how each child answers each question. She only sees a data dashboard to assign curriculum and assessments that will help the children meet the standards. Does this sound like the recipe for the death of a free society? It's not local control. So this is a man named Richard Culatta. He served as President Obama's Chief Technology Officer, and he bragged that Common Core's next generation assessments can collect 100,000 pieces of personal information on every child every day. Actionable data to adjust what's taught and tested in real time. Culatta now serves as the CEO of UNESCO partner, the International Society for Technology and Education, or the ISTE. ISTE's technology standards, ISTE's technology standards are actually what David Coleman was talking about clear back in 2013. They are the literacy standards for teachers and students that are helping UNESCO and the OECD integrate comprehensive sexuality education into all subjects through technology. The Obama administration is using these standards to promote digital literacy and digital citizenship. They say the new digital citizenship requires that children aren't just safe online, but that they use technology to advocate for their autonomous rights. Media literacy and financial literacy, as the PISA exams told us in their video, are also being used to infuse a children's rights curriculum into online learning. ISTE is partnered with UNESCO, Microsoft, Intel, and Cisco to train teachers and students to use technology for teaching and learning. These are the groups that are already integrating comprehensive sexuality education into most online subjects in Africa. Culatta helped the Obama administration with various technology initiatives in states and districts to support Race to the Top. One is called #GoOpen. Utah was one of the first states to collaborate. The idea was sold to teachers that they could create their own curriculum called Open Educational Resources. That term was coined by UNESCO in 2002. Open Educational Resources are online curriculum using Common Core's open data standards. One of its biggest funders is George Soros. It was sold to states as a way for local teachers to create an awesome supply of great online curriculum. But with a huge new supply of online curriculum, how will educators pick which online curriculums to use? Here's where the Obama administration was very smart. They had already set up online curating systems. These systems can rate online curriculum as long as it's in the open domain, where they can see the data. One of those curating systems is called the Learning Registry. President Obama's Deputy Director of Education Technology, Steve Midgley, said that the Learning Registry would help them find out that this teacher assigned this material. This teacher emailed this to someone else. This teacher dragged it onto a smartboard for 18 minutes. He said that the Learning Registry will let him know something about you and who you are, and let him do some mathematical operations against a very large data set and see if he can pair you with the appropriate relevant resource. So the Learning Registry operates like a litmus test for teachers and students. It's not about more options and more freedom in online curriculum, it's about control. There are several other curating systems that support common data standards. One, funded by Bill Gates, is called Graphite. It was created by Common Sense Education. This group advised Utah on its digital teaching and learning plan, which became state law. The founder, James Steyer, worked with the Obama administration and the FCC to push broadband into schools. Mr. Steyer lives in San Francisco and is pushing legislation in California to take away parents' rights. His legislation is patterned after the UN Rights of the Child Treaty, which promotes children's sexual rights. Steyer works with Hillary Clinton and one of President Obama's key partners named Linda Darling-Hammond. Darling-Hammond went from helping President Obama with Race to the Top for assessments to working with the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning called CASEL. Here's what CASEL is doing lately. They recently partnered with the National Club for State Superintendents. Their acronym is the CCSSO. The CCSSO is a nonprofit that every superintendent in the country is part of, and they co-created Common Core. CASEL and the CCSSO are working to push behavioral assessments into schools. One of their partners is the Novo Foundation, funded by Peter Buffett, billionaire Warren Buffett's son. Warren Buffett is the largest funder of International Planned Parenthood, and Peter Buffett's Novo Foundation promotes a broad sexual rights agenda. These groups are also partnered with Utah's current K-12 assessment provider, known as AIR, which is a behavioral assessment company, by the way. Novo Foundation recently launched their Radical Hope Fund, $20 million to promote feminism and interdependence to combat white supremacy, xenophobia, and misogyny. They focus on building power that centers around feminist leadership, especially the leadership of girls and women of color who see themselves as cisgender, transgender, or gender nonconforming. The National Nonprofit for State Superintendents, the CCSSO, holds a lot of power to push this agenda into schools. President Trump's Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, spoke to the CCSO in May 2017 and said that with the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act, they would be in charge of states and districts reforms. And they are doing just that in Utah, where we've created a unique partnership with them since the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act. DeVos also spoke at the joint Arizona State University Global Silicon Valley Summit in Utah last May. Global Silicon Valley Advisors is an investment firm that says they'll use Common Core to eliminate local school boards and help investors make windfall profits off of student data through online learning. So while DeVos may support traditional ideas of manhood and womanhood and marriage, she isn't stopping the power grab of those groups who are making the most off of Common Core, the sexual rights promoters, and the technology investors. With the spread of these technology initiatives funded by big investors, global competency-based ed is taking over whole cities. UNESCO and the OECD have promoted learning cities for a long time. With interoperable data systems created through Race to the Top, there are already 10 learning cities in America. Pittsburgh is launching a city challenge so that children will use their skills to combat fossil fuels. Children's competencies are meant to be traded like currency so that social impact investors can make money and turn children into commodities that will support the OECD's agenda for global citizenship. With the advent of learning cities, employers, museums, libraries, community centers, religious centers, etc., can all support online curriculum to advance global citizenship. Online learning is being turned into a video gaming social networking system. Global groups want students' social emotional data embedded in blockchain, the technology behind Bitcoin. Groups like the Rockefeller Foundation are now funding blockchain's global governance. Social networking style of learning helps kids collect digital badges to show their competencies. It's being designed to replace traditional accreditation organizations for higher ed so that all learning inside and outside school will be tied to global competency-based ed. Facebook, the company that says there are over 71 genders, has now partnered with the U.S. Department of Education on digital badging. The power of a social networking style of education to shape children's values cannot be overstated. Several former employees at Google, Facebook, and Twitter have come out to warn us that those companies are manipulating our choices and behaviors. China is now issuing online credit scores to ensure their citizens exhibit the right behaviors or face consequences to their opportunities and livelihood. As I mentioned, UNESCO is helping youth in Africa develop social networking apps to spread comprehensive sexuality education. The reforms that are happening there are happening everywhere, and right now here in Utah. In fact, social networking apps are already being discussed by Utah legislators as a solution to the comprehensive sexuality debate. So I just want to restate that with online computer adaptive learning in K through 12, in most cases, parents and teachers don't know what's being taught or how these assessment-embedded curriculums are shaping our children's worldview every day. The leaders of the largest denomination in the state are urging Christians to get involved in the battle for religious freedom. I believe that the biggest battlefield before us is in K through 12 online assessments and curriculum. I urge you that are here today to be prayerful and consider where your talents will be best used to protect children and strengthen families. Can you start a private school? Can you homeschool? Can you teach your grandchildren? Sorry. Can those stalwart, leaders in smaller communities rally their schools to get off federal funding and chart their own course? Christian parents do not need to give our children up to the agenda of the OECD's sexual rights partners who are blowing comprehensive sexuality education right past the health class doors into entire communities. We are not stakeholders in our children's educations, sitting next to a vast network of other more powerful stakeholders. We are our children's stewards by God-given ordination. It's time we stand and defend the family as the fundamental unit of society. Because if we don't, our children won't have the freedom to do so. So I want to give you some action items. These are some legislative action items that I thought of. First, we need to stop the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. It rearranges all government data systems and funnels them into one interoperable master database. Get Utah out of federal education funding now. Flip accountability laws so that schools are accountable to parents. This will free parents from national standards and global assessments. Stop U.S. funding to the OECD. Take legal action on those creating an illegal world curriculum through worldwide computer adaptive and interoperable assessments. Now, the second set of action items is where we take our stewardship. Please, once post this video online, I hope you might consider sharing it with your family members, with your community members. Go to stopcsc.org to learn more about stopping comprehensive sexuality education. Support homeschools, co-ops, and private schools. Encourage private schools to avoid online curriculum and assessments that they don't create and to vigilantly protect student data. Be watchdogs over your children's online learning. Know the content of your online curriculum before using it and what behavioral information it collects. Protect your children from phone apps promoting comprehensive sexuality. Go to imsglobal.org to see if the learning systems you're using are compliant with global competency-based ed. Now I want to close with a quote from one of my favorite people of all time, Gordon B. Hinckley. He served as president of the LDS Church and was one of the most optimistic and inspiring people that you could know. He said, "The problem with most of us is that we're afraid to stand up for what we believe, to be witnesses for what is true and right. We want to do the right thing, but we're troubled by fears, so we sit back, and the world drifts about us, and society increasingly adopts attitudes and standards of behavior that most of us do not approve of." So today, amongst all of you who are trying to do right by your children, I say, let's be among those who stand up. Thank you.